This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. This is a Common Lawyer comments, in this particular instance, concerning the Catechism, the Constitution of the United States, according to the Catechism of Arthur J. Stansbury, 18 and 28. Let's get to the Catechism. The Catechism is a word in the Bible. It means question, answer, trained by questioning and answering. And there are questions here, and then he gives the answer, and the student learns these. What do you mean by being tried by the Senate? Remember, we said the House of Representatives can impeach a president or a Supreme Court justice or a federal judge, anybody. Impeach them, anybody that works in government. Impeach them. The state houses can do the same thing, the lower house and the state legislatures. It's all a part of our common law tradition. This is how we get rid of people we don't want. Impeachment. Then impeachment is an old word that means to be caught by the foot. Impeachment is the same thing as grand jury indictment. Those are synonyms. Impeachment. I got you. Now I've got you. We're going to try you. I'm going to catch you by the foot. Well, that's impeachment. I've been impeached. I know what impeachment is. That's called indictment by a grand jury. When it comes to people in government, the House of Representatives impeaches them. One example from history. Of course, we know about Bill Clinton. He got impeached and tried in the Senate. The Senate sprung him from conviction by one vote. Takes a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict someone impeached. No power of punishment is given, just removal from office. That's it. That's the only power the Senate has. Well, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, President Andrew Johnson, right after that was Abe Lincoln's vice president, they tried to impeach him because he wouldn't abuse the southern states. He was from the South. He was from Tennessee. More battles of that war fought in Tennessee than any other state, by the way. It was, of course, a border state in a way. Kentucky and Tennessee were between the two great factions of the North and the South. There are a lot of supporters of the North in Tennessee. Matter of fact, all East Tennessee was Union. I had family members from East Tennessee that fought on the Union side. You know, they had secret factories at places like Pigeon Forge in Tennessee. It wasn't as clear-cut and easy as some say. Well, at any rate, there was this judge. Tom Jefferson was president. This back about a little after 1800. He was elected in the election of 1800, president of the United States, and immediately he was a vicious man. Well, God used him to do a lot of good things, like write the Declaration of 76, but he was a vicious man. Once he got into office, he wanted to use his power, his raw force, to crush his political opponents. One of them was Aaron Burr, but there were many others. He went after this one judge by the name of, he was a federal judge, and he wanted him impeached. Of course, him being president, he didn't have power to impeach him. That's the exclusive jurisdiction of that separate and co-equal branch of government called the Congress of the United States. He pushed for impeachment of old Judge Pickering. I believe the charges were excluding evidence in an admiralty case, number one, excluding exculpatory evidence. That goes on today, as you know. Exculpatory, that means evidence that would help the defendant be declared guilty. Excluding evidence in an admiralty case, cursing from the bench. That's bad enough, I reckon. All while being perpetually drunk. I think that was the charge. And he did like to pull a cork once in a while. That's an understatement. The old boy liked to hit the sauce. Of course, that loosened him up, oiled him up, where he done things like cussing from the bench and not paying attention to what was going on or making a wrong decision. And they got tired of it. Well, the Constitution of the United States says you can impeach a fellow like that for crimes and misdemeanors. You can't punish him for it. You can just remove him from office. That ticked Pickering off. And he knew who was behind the whole thing, the President of the United States, Tom Jefferson himself. So he wrote Jefferson a letter, challenged him to a duel. He said, I'm entitled to trial by battle. he was going to probably couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a spray gun if he was drunk all the time, but that's what he wanted to do. I think Jefferson in that case declined to even respond to him because he probably was 3 sheets to the wind. But that's what impeachment is. I think they did get rid of the boy. Here's another one. This fellow became a Supreme Court Justice of the United States. His name was Stephen Field, brother to, I can't remember his brother's first name. He's the one that put together the deal that his brother that laid the first transatlantic cable for telegraph. What a deal that was. Can you imagine having that much wire that big around, a spool of cord, a wire that big around? How many spools it would take on a ship to, they did it. And in some instances, they got pretty well, see, it had to be real thick because if it wasn't real thick as it was being hung down in the ocean a couple of miles, it'd break from the weight. Well, that happened a time or two. And that, what a bummer. You get way out there, you know, and then have to start again. And expensive too. Well, they finally got her laid though. That was his brother, Cyrus, I believe. I believe his name was Cyrus. Yeah, Cyrus. Well, this guy, he was a lawyer out during the gold rush, and he had been a lawyer in New York City, went around the horn, wound up in, what a colorful personality. Ended up, of course, the animosity between people in the North and people in the South was rife, and it wasn't people in the North that were being ugly. They were talking in ways that the people in the South didn't like, and the people in the South, and there were, those two factions were in California. And the people in the South, or from the South, were challenging the people from the North to duels a lot. And there was no law in California, so duels were the way men settled their differences. And a judge there, who was from Texas, challenged him to a duel. He was from an old Puritan family in New England. He didn't take it lightly. And it got out of hand to where this other, it was a judge challenged him. He was a lawyer. He was getting wood out of his wood box. It was cold. He lived in Marysville. He said back in them days, this is what Field said, that every man was his own servant. And he was out getting wood to take inside to keep his body warm. And he felt something bump the back of his head. And he looked like this, and here was this judge, had a Navy Colt revolver, a 6-shooter revolver cocked and right up against his head. And he said, I want you to take back this, that, or the t'other, or I'm going to teach you I don't know what he said. And Fields said, shoot and be damned. Just shoot, be damned. It made him just mad, and he thought it was silly. And that's what a lot of people in the North thought about the South. Now, the South, you got to remember, again, I got family from the South. My family came from the South. I had some down there. They settled where they settled, along the Wabash River. Yeah, I can talk about all that. I understand the culture. I got on the other side of my family. They were a little closer. They were from Kentucky, and I knew them. They had this idea in their head in the South that they were chivalrous. Was there anything wrong with that? No. But they took it to a fantasy degree, and that was through the writings of a man named Sir Walter Scott, who romanticized the Scottish Highlanders. Falsely, by the way. It was all baloney. It was trying to make money writing books, and he wrote books about the Highlanders, and the Highlanders were scoundrels. They sold their people out into slavery during the 1700s. That's why so many of them came to America, and so many of them migrated to Northern Ireland. They were starving on the coasts of Scotland because the Highlanders didn't care about their own people. They didn't care if they killed them and raped them and slaughtered them. And they had this idea because of Sir Walter Scott that they were a chivalrous people, and they were reading those books that he was writing. And then it was just like watching movies and thinking this is the way reality really is. That's not the way reality is. He took concepts that were good from our common law and fantasized them about people. Like there are people in the world that aren't dangerous. No, we're all a pretty rotten bunch, and we need the savior. Now, Scotland eventually got that idea. The Reformation had taken over big time there. But in the South, those books became popular and it fomented a war. Sir Walter Scott was more responsible for that bloody, awful, unnecessary slaughter of Americans, slaughtering each other like animals, than probably anybody else. Abe Lincoln said Harriet Beecher Stowe was responsible for the. He said, "Here's the little lady responsible for this big war." She'd written that book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Again, it was meant to. The abolitionist movement got out of hand too. It got out of hand on both sides, and it was fantasy what people were saying on both sides. And of course, when people start arguing, they're in the middle talking, and then they increasingly go to the opposite ends of the poles, and they go to the extreme ends. They get extremist in their views, and then they start killing. That's the way war works. You don't want to be a part of it. Don't want to be a part of it. Don't want to be a part of making it. Don't do that. You can say the truth without being belligerent about it. And the Bible says, honor all men. And when you say the truth, make sure you do it in a respectful way. Just respectful of the other fella. That's all. Well, let's get to the Catechism, Miss Francine. I thought I was there. I was, and I left. What do you mean by his being tried by the Senate? Answer. The senators of the United States take a solemn oath that they will carefully attend to the proof that shall be brought before them. According to that proof, declare the accused person being impeached and tried, innocent or guilty, as the case may be. You only have two choices, friends, when you're on a jury, and that's what the House of Representatives is. They're on a jury. It's either yes or no. If you're on a grand jury, it's either yes or no. If you're on a trial jury, it's either yes or no. There is no gray area between. Make it real simple. That's why juries work. We don't hedge it. Either you proved beyond a reasonable doubt or you didn't. And that's your decision to make. The House of Representatives appoints some of their own members to lay the proof before the Senate. And afterwards, the accused person lays them the proofs in his defense. When both have been heard, that's called due process. You both get an opportunity to wield your weapons. The members of the Senate vote, that is, each one declares his opinion. And if 2/3, that's what vote is, by the way. What is the word vote? You vote? Did you vote for DJ Trump or somebody in the last election? The word vote is a Latin word that means will. Volition is the same word as vote, the same root word. What does it mean? It's an expression of what you want, your will. Here's what I would want. Does it rule? No, it doesn't rule. It's just an expression of what you want. You voted for DJ Trump, for example. He's still not, if he gets the majority vote, he still hasn't won. No, he's got to get the electors to vote in a majority for him. There's a two-stage process here. We don't trust the popular vote. Why? Because cheating has been a part of voting for thousands of years. Need I remind you that? Finally, it came out in the open in 2020, didn't it? In a big way. The House of Representatives appoints some of their own members to lay proof before the Senate, etc. Defense. Each senator has one vote, declares his opinion, what he wants. If 2/3 of all the senators who are present, not 2/3 of all the senators, what would be 2/3 of all the senators? Well, how many senators are there? Well, how many states are there? There are 50 states. And there are 2 senators from each state. Each state has equal representation in the United States Senate. So there are 100 senators. Well, what's 2/3 of 100? What's a third of 100? Third of 100. Well, a third of 100 would be 33.333333333. Well, that's a third, but that's not enough to make over a third. 2/3 would be 60. That'd be 33 times 2 would be 66. You'd have to have 66.6 to make 2/3. Miss Francine, is my math right there?
66.
Double check me, will you?
Which would 66.6%.
Right. 33.3 twice, 66.666666666. So it would take 67. That's right, Miss Francine. Take 67 senators to convict a president or a federal judge or whatever on impeachment. Well, of those present, there has to be a quorum present. That's another question. We'll get to that in the Constitution, in the Catechism here. He's either guilty or not guilty. In other words, he's either removed from office or he isn't. Question 66. Cannot the Senate in like manner impeach? That is, solemnly charge an officer before the House of Representatives by a two-thirds vote and say, we want the House of Representatives to impeach this person. What's the answer? Can they do that? No, they can't. Constitution doesn't allow that. No one can bring an impeachment but the House of Representatives, period. End of sentence, end of paragraph. The House of Representatives and no other. The House of Representatives and no more has power of impeachment. Can somebody recommend somebody for impeachment? Well, sure, you can do that. You can write to your senator. I was going to tell you about Stephen Fields. This judge that put the pistol to the back of his head. There were two or three fellows after him like that. Finally, when he became a Supreme Court justice, one of those fellows who had been Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, one of them tried to murder him with a knife, and the U.S. Marshal shot him graveyard dead. Boom. At a train station in Stockton, California, while he was a Supreme Court justice. That really happened. And then, of course, the marshal was tried for murder. That happened. He was acquitted. Well, they didn't go through trial, but eventually it was dropped. But he ran then after that fella pointed that pistol at his head. He ran for the state house, the first state house California ever put in place. He ran for state house, and his only purpose for running was to get that fella impeached. He was a bad man. He was from Texas, and he was belligerent and always wanting to fight. He had this idea about chivalry and that he was pushing to the nth degree, but he didn't know what a fair fight was. When he finally told Justice Fields he wanted a fair fight, he said, well, what weapons do I? No, Justice Fields, whoever makes the challenge, the other fella, this is old trial by battle at common law. The other fella gets to choose the weapons. So Fields said, okay, shotguns at 10 paces. And if that doesn't do the job, butcher knives. I think that's the way it came down, but I know that it came down to those two weapons. I remember that. Now, did Fields make that suggestion? I don't remember. He agreed to it, whatever. And he went to the place of battle, which was an upper story room in a house recently built, a big room. And the other buzzard didn't show up, forfeited. That's what happened. Well, impeachment. And he got into office. He tried to get that fellow impeached, and he couldn't get the other representatives to go along with him. Who knows why? Finally, he pushed and pushed and pushed, and he got him appointed a judgeship. This judge he wanted impeached, he got him appointed a judgeship in the absolute howling wilderness where there were nothing but grizzly bears and wild red Indians. And that's no kidding. It was up around Mount Shasta. And up around Mount Shasta, back in the 1850s, there wasn't nothing up there. There's still not much up there. I've been through there a lot of times. The grizzly bears still rule a lot of that territory. I'll put it that way. Yeah. Well, Susanville, all up in there. I think it was near Susanville, Mount Shasta. Yeah, that's a wilderness. Matter of fact, it's so different up there than the rest of California that since World War II, they started a movement back then to be sheared off from the state of California and form their separate state because they have nothing, I say nothing, in common with the rest of California. And they wanted to call the state of Jefferson, and that organization still exists. You can go to the internet and look up stateofjefferson.com, and they're still pushing for it. Well, just like parts of Illinois are pushing to be a separate state and along with parts of Indiana to get away from Chicago. Eastern Washington has voted in their Washington has voted in their legislature or there's been a vote on the floor to separate Eastern Washington from Western Washington. British Columbia in Canada, there's a movement afoot there to be annexed into the United States. They're so sick of the stupidity of the law of the city. Well, let's not get there, friends. Let's keep doing what we do. All right. Question number 66. No, question number 67. What is the consequence if the Senate declare an officer of the United States to be guilty? What is the consequence if the Senate declare an officer of the United States guilty? After he's impeached, he's sent to the Senate for trial. What's the answer? He may be turned out of office and prevented from ever again holding any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. They can exclude him from government service, put him out of office, exclude him from government service. That's all they can do, though. They have no criminal jurisdiction to inflict punishment. Remember, the Congress of the United States is a separate and co-equal branch of government, just like your state legislature. We are a common law country. That means each branch of government stands on its own, doesn't owe the other branches obedience at all, unless they want to. They can if they want. But nobody tells them what to do. But on the other hand, that being true, the Congress of the United States has no teeth, has no arm of force and violence, has no enforcement power of anything, has to depend entirely upon the executive branch to enforce their legislation, for example. Every piece of legislation they pass, they have no power of enforcement. Why? Because the President of the United States has the power of enforcement of law, not Congress. See, that's called separation of powers, how important that is to have freedom. You put all those kinds of things, enforcement power, legislative power, judicial power, allow that to be those three to be gathered into a single will, you're going to be living in hell real quick. Mankind, mere mortals, sinful mankind, God does not allow to gather all three branches of government into a single hand like Adolf Hitler did. And they allowed him to do, said he could do. They destroyed their country, my friends. The judgment of God upon Germany, it was the judgment of God. God is the God of war. That country was flattened, clean down to the ground. The suffering, the hellishness of what happened there is beyond anything I could describe. And I've heard people talk about it that they were there when the fire bombings occurred. Was that right that the Allies did that? Probably not. But understand this, God is sovereign, and he will bring hell to a nation. And then he'll turn around and judge the nation that brought hell to them. He'll do that too. The Bible's clear. But what is the greatest offense to our Maker that Germany did? I'll tell you what it was. Not only did they do it, they did it as a Christian nation. What did they do? They said it's okay, Adolf, for you to gather all three powers of government into a single will and do anything you want. No man, friends, no mere mortal can handle that. Well, he did pretty well for a couple of years. Germany came out of the depths of depression to be the most prosperous country in the world in 2 years because of his policies. But God is not going to allow that, and it didn't happen. You know, we can argue about what they did to the Jews and whether the Holocaust was real, all that. Let's focus on what the Bible says. The Bible says God's not going to allow the law of the city. The law of the city as opposed to the law of the land. The civil law of Rome and Babylon as opposed to the common law that we have here in America. Let's guard it very closely. This is the laws of nature, the laws of nature. unwritten of our Declaration of 76. It is how the rubber meets the road with our Bibles, our common law tradition, the law of the land. One more question. 68. May he be further punished? Answer, no, not by the Senate. He may afterwards be tried before a court of law and punished in the same manner as any other criminal for offenses against the law. If a prosecutor wants to bring charges against him, he can do that. If he committed a crime within a certain jurisdiction or a federal crime or whatever. But the Senate has no criminal jurisdiction to inflict punishment. This is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long.